I'd like, okay, let me do this. I'd like to begin by saying something about where I got the article. Oh, the mission statement, of course. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are dedicated to treating all human beings with love and respect. And we're happy that those of you that have joined us are with us at this time. So we're going to introduce ourselves. That's the first thing. So according to the persons aligned on my screen, I see Lynn, then Stanton, Marba.
You should just call them out one at a time.
Okay, so Lynn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lynn Frank in New Orleans. Glad to be here.
Stanton.
Good morning, Stanton here in Austin.
Thank you, Stanton. Good to see you. Marba. Marba has frozen.
Oh, she jumped off. She'll have to come back.
She'll come back. Cindy.
Good morning. I had to go get my coffee filled up. Sorry. I felt the slightest hint of fall this morning, which is kind of neat. We're almost there, y'all.
Yes, wonderful.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. Phyllis.
Good morning, I'm Phyllis. I have been coming to Erace since 2008. I'm in New Orleans, and I didn't get up until 10:15, so I'm not quite camera ready. You may not see me today.
Thanks, Phyllis. Cheryl.
Good morning, everyone. This is an incredible article, Marion. I don't know how far we were supposed to read. It seems like it just goes on forever with incredible information. I have been with Erace for several years. I come in and out, and I really appreciate everyone that's here and all of their opinions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Let's see. You all have jumped around on the screen. Bill.
Yeah, I'm Bill Ives, and I've been coming to Erace for about 6 years, and we missed you guys, and so we're glad to be back. I can read the land acknowledgement that's in front of me if you want me to.
Just as soon as we finish with the folks, I would appreciate it, Bill.
Okay, let me know when I should read it.
Yes, Glenn.
Glenn Abdullah, glad to be here this morning. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, thank you. Gigi.
My name is Greer. I've been coming to Erace since post-Katrina. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Now there was someone else on the screen, and now they're on, and they've left my screen. Dee Dee, I don't see you, but you were there. Are you still there? Okay, maybe she'll come back.
I didn't let Dee Dee in.
And you want to get back to Marva too.
Marva's back.
Okay, Marva, okay, you were frozen before.
I was frozen and then disappeared off the screen. My name is Marva, and I've been attending Erace post-Katrina. I'm located in the New Orleans area, known as Gentilly.
Thank you, Marva. Dee Dee, can you hear us? Okay, maybe she'll pop back on the screen.
Marion, do you see Dee Dee on the screen?
I did.
She was, and then she left.
Okay, I'll let her back in if she comes.
Okay, all right. All right, Bill, if you would read the land acknowledgement for us, please, we would appreciate it.
We acknowledge that what we know as the United States is the traditional territory of indigenous people. Members of the group today on the lands of the Tonkawan, the Lapine Apache and the Comanche in Austin, the Chicamacha in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Lapin and Pascaway in Maryland, the Wampanoag and Micmac peoples in Boston, and the Koola and Mojave in Riverside County, California. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through generations. We state our intention to continue that stewardship now and into the future.
Thank you, Bill. Did everyone have a chance to introduce himself or herself?
Yes.
Okay. So this morning, everyone, I'm Marion. I've been attending the Erace discussion since June of 1993. And at the beginning, when I joined you all, I told you about a little incident that happened earlier this week. So I'm gonna dive right into this. But before we begin with the discussion, I wanted to say just a couple of things about the Pew Research Center. I thought this was very interesting. I apologize for the article being so long. I didn't have an opportunity to edit it, but the Pew Research Center is a nonpartisan fact tank that informs the public about social issues, public opinion, and demographic trends shaping the United States and the world. And this particular survey was conducted September 8th through the 13th in 2020, and again from October 4th through the 17th in 2021. So it did discover a certain span of time. The Pew Research Center conducts public opinion polling, demographic research. It calls people randomly through their cell phones and landlines, and it does media content analysis, social science research, and they do this through observation and experience rather than through theory or logic. So with that being said, I chose this article not just because it was so provocative, but it came from two women's points of view. And at the risk of sounding stereotypical, their names are Kiana Cox and Khadijah Edwards. And I'm thinking that they are two Black women who believe that they had some insight as to how this can help all of us go forward in helping to understand racism and also try to reduce it. But there was a little negative viewpoint to it also. We might touch on that, but I'm really interested in what we all have to say this morning. So with that being said, and dropping my pen on the floor, the list is open. Oh, the rules. We raise one finger if we want to be on the list. The comment is to last 2 minutes or less if you don't feel like you have that much to say in 2 minutes. 2 fingers to ask a clarifying question. The question should begin with what, not necessarily why. Hopefully that's covered in the comment. And there's to be no back and forth bantering. We want to respect each other's opinion, so we're not going to have a back and forth or confrontational conversation with one another. I'm sure we're going to respect everyone's point of view.
Marion, can I clarify the clarifying questions?
Clarify the clarifying question.
So
Please.
basically a clarifying question is if the person who is making the comment, the 2-minute person, says something you missed or you didn't understand a word or a name, etc. Something really simple. You just say, I didn't understand what you meant. Can you clarify what you said? It is not to challenge what they said or give your own opinion in the form of a question. So that's what they're for. They're not to make this into a, like Marion said, a back and forth conversation. It's just to clarify.
All right, thank you, Phyllis. At the end of our discussion, we'll have a wrap up 15 minutes before the end of the discussion, and then we'll have announcements and anything else that somebody might think that's very important. So remember, one finger to be on the list, 2 fingers for a clarifying question. And the comments are going to take about 2 minutes. And we will, anyone who doesn't have an opportunity to speak or doesn't want to speak during the discussion, at the end, you'll have 2 minutes. Everybody else will have 1 minute. And again, we ask that you refrain from personal attacks. Okay, I think that just about covers it. So we will begin our discussion. Black Americans have a clear vision for reducing racism, but little hope it will happen. And hopefully the participants in our group will give us some very positive insights. I'm sure we will. So the list is open. Anyone? All right, Marva.
I think everyday life calls out to Black Americans. We're not good enough. We're not deserving enough to live the great American life. We always was considered less than. That have not changed through my lifetime. And very hopeful before I close my eyes, the thought process will have changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Bill, is your hand up? Bill?
Hey, thank you. I read this article and sadly I agreed with the premise. I have this group and other actions before it, activities before it, have opened my eyes to the pervasiveness of racism in every aspect of our life, every aspect we've covered, whether it's health, education, police, criminal justice. There's a racism is a component, but I would like to say I'm not optimistic that I will see changes in my lifetime. I've seen some changes, yes, but not nearly enough. I grew up in New Orleans in the 50s when height of Jim Crow and segregation, went to an all-white school. And so those things have changed, but the underlying racism in our society has not changed. In some ways, it's getting worse with the new Jim Crow laws on voting and other things. But I feel it's my responsibility, and I know Cindy shares that, to do as much as we can, not to give up. And we're starting some new activities in the criminal justice segment, which I will state in the announcements and see if other people want to participate. but I'm glad that you raised this article. It brings facts, and I have great respect for Pew Research, and it brings facts to the discussion. They're not surprising facts, but it's good to see the facts. Thank you, Marion, for your excellent article.
Thank you, Bill. Cindy, are you raising your hand? You're muted. Unmute.
I wasn't raising my hand, but I would love to put in my 2 cents for the moment. I grew up in the Carolinas in the 50s. A lot of the concrete day-to-day living things are different. The schools were all white. There was not a Black face in my neighborhood, unless you crossed the big drainage ditch behind the house and went a few blocks. You know, like most Southern towns, it was geographically very separate. In my neighborhood now, there's mixture, Black, white mixture, and international people. Not fully. I mean, there certainly are, quote, ghettos in New Orleans, but there's a lot of mixture too. But I think that's been true of New Orleans for a long time. We've come a long way, but a lot of the structures, the legal system has a lot of racism built into it that we need to work with changing. It's kind of a large job. I don't know quite where to begin, but I do think it's being chipped away at, but it's too slow. Don't have solutions. I wish I did. We'll keep working on it.
Thank you, Cindy. Cindy touched on something. This will give some of you who haven't spoken yet an opportunity to think about. I'm particularly interested in the overhaul of the institutions that will make sure that people of color get what they're deserving of as American citizens, the right to pursue happiness and liberty, most of all justice, but this overhauling of the system. They're on page number 6 of 15. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 systems: the prison system, policing, courts and judicial, political, economic, and healthcare. And I personally believe that those components are very, very, very important. I can't say how important I think they are, that really need to be revamped so that some of these inequities and injustices are just completely wiped off the board. So during the discussion, also the consideration of medical and mental health and social services. I think that overall in our American society is overlooked, I think, to some extent. It's as if we're ashamed to discuss mental health issues. There's some kind of stigma attached if you dare try to approach anything dealing with mental health. And I really think that's not to be used as an excuse, but I really think it's a serious consideration that really needs to be addressed more fully than it is. So do I see any fingers? Cheryl, thank you.
I really resonate with what you've said, and tying in what Bill said is that, we really have to be super active to do our part. We're deciding where to go to a restaurant, we're deciding where to shop. Things like that are important. And then, of course, being active by signing petitions, showing up for things, being a part of what's going on. I mean, here I've been very fortunate to be able to go down to St. James Parish and educate myself more and more on what's happening to the citizens that are down there. But, just demanding equality through these systems, like you said, is really, it's our part. We have to seek it out, I think. I wish we had younger people here. That was one of the things that really got me. The two things with all the reading that I was able to do, I think I got to page 3, was just the difference in age and the difference in political parties. I don't think I saw that they divided it by income or anything like that, so I could see. But it was interesting that, like, the part about voting was so interesting, that older people do believe still in voting, it seems, and that they need to use that institution or political institution as a way to make changes. But then younger people didn't feel that way. And that was really interesting to me. And I'm aware of a lot of young people and a lot of the movements and things that they're doing, and they're doing things differently. Although, so they're almost like they're creating new systems for things and not using the old structures, so they don't feel like spending the time with it. But also the political party information was really interesting. There was a vast difference between Republican Blacks and Democratic Blacks. One of the things that really struck me is yesterday, talking to my neighbor across the street, he had little access to education, monies, and things that would have changed his life. So he is in a certain bracket. His family owns the house and he lives there, and I think he's secure, and he does odd jobs for employment. It was interesting. We were talking about a neighbor put a security camera on the street, on the telephone pole, their own security camera up, so they could watch their cars. And he told me that one had been broken into 3 times and the other one had been broken into 3 times, a window busted out. And he said, yeah, they took his work stuff out of the back. They stole it. I said, guns? And he said, yeah, guns. And I said, I know shit. That guy works for the FBI. And he said, what do you mean? He's an artist in the French Quarter. These people park their car in this man's driveway. They utilize across the street. They don't have a driveway to park a car. And their car's been broken into several times. And it was his FBI guns that got stolen out of the back of the car. And even my neighbor goes, what kind of a stupid person leaves guns in a car? We both go, I don't own a gun. I don't own a gun. We don't want them in our houses. But I mean, he just doesn't even have access. And I point out the Blue Lives Matter flag that's hanging from this man's house. And I said, that's a police support sign, flag. It indicates that they have guns in that house. That's really not a very smart thing to be doing, really, in our city right now, I think. But every time a police officer gets shot, he puts his flag up and waves it for a while. And, my neighbor was like, I just thought that was another variation of the flag. He doesn't have access to internet. He's not busy like we are, learning and expanding ourselves. So I feel that I just had to mention that in all of this about this inequality. We really need to improve our education system, and help people have access to the internet and to be able to play on a fair playing ground, to be able to take away this inequality. I think I've spoken long enough and far enough. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Cheryl. Glenn?
Okay. How can we treat a problem? It's like a doctor trying to treat a disease and he don't know what the disease is. So we're talking about treating a problem that we don't even know what the problem is. So I'm gonna read to you what the problem is. We were taken from our homeland, so-called Africa, and mercilessly crammed into dark, dank halls of slave ship like sardines, forced to live with our own filth. No effort at all was made by our captors to treat or respect us as human beings. This cruel treatment was designed to break up and destroy the true life that was within the bodies of our foreparents. The slave master treated us as flesh, but they disregarded the person within the flesh. They planned to kill the person within the flesh. and make the flesh become stronger than the person within. How much time I got left?
I'm not sure.
All right, good. I'm gonna continue.
All right,
First,
maybe one more minute, and then you can get back on the list.
all right. First, put me back on the list. First, the slave master broke our spirit and made us accept being handled like animals. Whenever they would gradually let us have a little freedom, they were slip ideas into our dull minds that would do the work, the crime of keeping the inward person dead. The church made us physical. The slave master worked to instill slave mentality in us with the Bible, the Christian religion, the Uncle Tom preachers who preach us into a physical thing out of a spiritual thing. Most of our poor people prayed, sang, and cried in the church, thinking that it was making them spiritual. But its preacher, but it made them physical. The church told us that we didn't have any opportunity in this world, but that our hope was in a world to come. It told us that we were spiritual and that we had a future life as spiritual beings. The
All right,
church never did.
Glenn, excuse me. I have you back on the list,
All right.
and you can continue on along that line of thought. Is there someone who he or she may have raised their hand while I was looking at the list?
Bill has his hand up.
Bill? Okay, Bill, it's your turn to speak.
Unmute. I just unmuted. I was trying to lower my hand too.
All right.
I think Lynn very aptly addressed the trauma, the intergenerational trauma that I can't pretend to imagine what it's like, but I am familiar with intergenerational trauma, and the mental health issues that Marion said. It's like that's a major source. What Glenn described is a major source for PTSD, and the PTSD gets passed on generations, and it will take a long time to heal that PTSD. And the majority, well, many whites, I don't know whether it's a majority or not, but a substantial number of whites don't want that healing to occur. They want people of color to remain subjugated in half. The one thing I've experienced a few things in my life, like I get held up at knife point by two teenagers in the Lower East Side, that was kind of like what Marion described, that trauma there. And so I have an inkling of what it's like, but not a full thing. And what Glenn described is a powerful source of intergenerational trauma and PTSD that can be passed on. I know most African Americans are very resilient in the face of this, but it still must take a terrible toll. So I think I'll end that at that point.
All right, I want to thank you, Bill. The list is open. I've added,
Don't you have me on the list?
I have you on the list. I was about to say, I have you one person away. Is there someone who'd like to join the conversation right now after Bill? We'd appreciate hearing from everybody today. I think this is so very important that we as human beings get to an understanding of
Well,
each other.
can I get busy?
Oh, anyone else after Bill? And we'll let Glenn finish his thoughts.
All right, I'm ready.
You have 2 more minutes.
The diabolical scheme. What effect did this diabolical scheme have on us? It made us satisfied to give up on any human elevation and live with whatever the slave master world put on us. Our pleasures were then reduced to animal pleasures, like eating and sleeping. In fact, our pleasures were reduced lower than the lowest animal, because even the lowest animal has some sense of animal dignity, some sense of animal spirituality, a social life, and some recreation. None of these things were in the slave life of our people. We would only hope for enough cheap food for supper to fill our stomachs after we came in from the scorching, dusty fields, enough water to quench our parched throat, and a place to rest our weary bodies for a few hours of sleep. In the early days of slavery, we prayed and sang spiritual songs, asking for the physical things of life. We sang for golden slippers, white robes, golden crowns, harps to play on, and milk and honey. Though we call that heaven a spiritual heaven, we were really actually hoping for a physical heaven. We became physicalized. When we neglected the cultivation of the real life within us, the higher form within the physical body suffers and dies. Then the physical body falls under a curse. As slaves, we became to neglect ourselves physically. We ate so much of the wrong food that we begin to grow all out of shape.
All
We
right, Glenn,
neglected.
that's 2
Yeah,
minutes. That's I was watching my time. It's 2 minutes.
put me back on the list.
Get back on the list.
Cheryl has a
All
clarifying
right,
question.
Cheryl, you have a clarifying question?
Glenn, did you write that yourself?
I don't have that kind of brain power.
And where did this writing come from, Glenn?
From Warren Dean Muhammad, my leader.
Thank you.
You can go to newafricaradio.com and you find all his articles there.
All right, we'll get that name again at the end of the
All right, can I start again?
discussion. I'd like to give someone else an opportunity to address some of the other aspects. I really appreciate how these 2 ladies divided this information into categories, each one highlighted by heavy black print. And I really would like someone to also address why Black people, I'm not going to say all Black people, but many, a large portion of them are very skeptical about changes. So don't feel free, don't hesitate just because you're not Black to speak your piece. We want to hear from everybody.
Bill have their hands up and Marva.
All right, Marva, I see you.
Greer and Bill were first and then Marva.
All right, I don't see Greer on my screen. Greer,
It's
I'm so
Gigi.
sorry.
It's
Gigi,
Gigi. That's Greer.
that's Greer, yes. I don't see you on the screen. Maybe you'll pop back. It must be my computer. So who was first, Phyllis?
I would like Greer to go first.
Yeah,
All right, Greer.
Greer, Bill, and
Well,
Marva.
let me ask y'all this. When do I get back on the list? Y'all just gonna hold me out there in air somewhere? When
You've
you gonna
already
put my
had,
name down?
excuse me, please.
You're kind of monopolizing it with that reading.
You've had your time. Glenn, please give these three people opportunity. I have Greer.
I'm not saying that they
Excuse
can't speak. When
me.
do you put my name down?
Excuse me, I have pen in hand. I'm a human being. I'm not a robot. I'm writing down names. We have Greer. Who is the person after Greer?
Bill, and then Marva,
Bill, Marva,
and then Glenn.
and Glenn.
Thank you.
All right, Greer. Please, we would appreciate hearing your comments.
I understand what my uncle's saying. But at the same time, when we were freed as people, there was no help. There was no mental health. There was nothing. We were free and told, basically, you're free and to go on. Dr. Joy DeGroot talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome. And that's exactly what he's talking about. How due to trauma over and over again, that things have been passed on due to that trauma. And it affects basically every aspect of our lives. Mind you, some people have fared better than others, and some haven't. And I remember when he used to say back when we met in person, you know, we are the newest people on earth, because if you think about it, each successive generation we got away from the source of Africa as an open vessel, they put into us what they wanted to put into us. And it's not just from our side as being victim, it's also from being victimized. Because the person who victimizes you is also part of the problem. I mean, I died laughing because people are so sensitive about things. There's a new version of The Little Mermaid coming out, where she is Black. And people are up in arms over a fictitious character, a cartoon storybook character, saying, oh, I'm not going to watch it. They're destroying the story. It's a story and it's not real. Yes, African Americans definitely have been victimized, but they're still being victimized today. There was no help. There was nothing for us when we were free. It's going to take as much time to heal us as it did to break us. We spent over 467 years in captivity. The fix isn't that quick, but it's going to take us to do that. We have to start self-healing. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Bill?
Yes, I'm raising my hand to carry on the conversation, not trying to monopolize, but in absence of other people, I'm raising my hand. And I certainly have things to say, of course. Greer talked about one of the more recent absurdities. People didn't want a Black Little Mermaid. What about a Black Jesus? But when we were in London, we went to the theater a lot. In the London theater, well, they're not African American, but African British actors and actresses play historical characters, regardless of the race of the character. So we went to a play that was about Queen Mary and the Churchills, and the first Churchills. And the man who played John Churchill was an African descent, very black man. And at first I was struck by it, but then it's like, oh, that's effective. Because it shows that black actors are not limited to playing black characters. And it just made me think in a positive way about that opportunity. So, but I will say, echoing on what Glenn started about, slavery was so inhumane. The British were some of the worst perpetrators. In Jamaica, the slaves were used to create sugar, which is a very dangerous product. And in Laura Plantation in Louisiana, the plantation owner, who was French, decided she would make a lot of money by breeding slaves. And in Jamaica, they decided it was more cost effective to just let the slaves die and replace them with new ones. So they didn't try to encourage slaves to have children. They just died off in the process. And that is so unimaginably disgusting. So we have a long way to go, but we're still going to try to help. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question for Bill.
Yeah.
Do you think, like you said, you saw Black Britons in the theater playing all different roles? Do you think that in a secular world that it's done on purpose not to allow Black people, no matter what their nationality is, to play supposedly white roles?
If I understand you correctly, I say absolutely. That's another form of racism. So if I understand your question correctly, I say absolutely yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I asked.
Yeah. I gave kudos to the British theater because they seem to allow actors to play roles based on their skills, not their color. But you don't see that happening in America. Even like The Little Mermaid is a perfect example. There should be no controversy about that. When Betty White had a TV show, and she, I should get back on the list. I'm
I was
sorry.
about to say that, Bill, because we still have Marva and Glenn. Thank you both for your comments. So at this time, Marva, would you share your conversation with us, please?
I lost my thoughts with this bantering back and forth, who was first, who was on the list, and now the thoughts escaped me.
All right, after, I'll still keep you on the list. Glenn?
Well, great. That's shortened my time on waiting. All right. After cramping us in miserable physical conditions that serve to break down the real human in the body and make it give up hope, the slave master put ideas in our warped minds in a very deceitful and psychological way to shackle our minds with physical chains. These physical chains came in the form of words, but they were stronger than any chains you can imagine to keep us in bondage of slave mentality. The Christian religion became a powerful doctrine to keep us in mental slavery. Even the God that they call a spiritual God was given to us in a physical form. They taught us to trust in that God, Jesus, and to give ourselves wholeheartedly to him because he was our only savior. Our mothers and fathers did not fall in love with God the Father, a spiritual being. They fell in love with God the Son in the flesh, a physical being. When we thought about a poor, bleeding, physical Christ on the cross, we thought about God. When we sang our song of praise for God, we were thinking of a physical man nailed to a cross. Our minds became filled with sentiment, thinking of a man suffering and dying physically for our sins. After our heaven and even our God had been made physical, that there was nothing to feed the true life within our body, to elevate it and to draw it up to a higher level. Hello,
Glenn,
teacher
that's
Glenn.
time. That's 2 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the list is open.
Cindy
I want to
was,
get back on the list.
Cindy had her finger up.
Cindy,
Did you hear my request?
I heard you, Glenn.
All right.
I'm writing Cindy's name,
And
Okay.
Lynn,
Lynn. And we would appreciate, Glenn, if you, Glenn, G with a G, as in
And
giraffe.
Gigi's hand is up again.
All right.
Um,
After I have Cindy, I have Lynn, who raised her finger, Gigi,
yeah,
Glenn, follows Gigi.
okay,
All right, Cindy, you're up.
okay. I think one of the elements that has not been mentioned very much is the economic. If you look at everyone's daily life, one of the major underpinnings of everything else is the economic reality. And if there is as much discrimination as this article says, and I think we all have seen it, across the races based on race, the discrimination in the world of economics is horrible and is a basis for a lot of other things. Like if you don't have a decent job, you can't save enough money to buy a house, you get cheated with credit charges. It's very unfair for less income people, lower income people, to even try to compete because of the differential treatment in the system of credit. That's the basis of homeownership, of ease with kids going to college, the whole thing. If you don't have enough money to live comfortably, your future is pretty much determined by the economics of life, which is sad. I don't see a way around it except more systems that would support home ownership or support toward that among lower income families. I don't know if it exists out there at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Lynn, with an L.
At the very beginning of the article, there was a very sad fact that following the horrible death, the killing of George Floyd by the police officers, there was a general awareness throughout the country that things needed to change, that Black people were treated unfairly. And at this point, the polling suggests that Black people throughout the country thought, at last, people are paying attention to our plight and maybe things will get better. But several years have gone by and optimism has faded because there have not been enough changes. I think politicians are afraid to say the word reparations because immediately the Republicans will jump all over it and say, oh, they just love Black people. They don't care about you poor white people. They have to be brave and do it anyway and explain to everyone the need for it, and at the same time do things that will improve the status of all poor people in this country. And I think that is maybe the Biden approach. He is trying to improve the situation of poor white people and poor Black people together without using the R word. But if we don't start talking eventually about the R word, it's not going to happen. But if you look at The Little Mermaid, that's just an example. You say anything and the extreme right-wing racists are going to leap upon it. Oh, they're turning your childhood favorites into Black people. This is horrible. We have to take back our country. It's a damn arguing point. It's a damn rallying point for racism and to make people hate liberal people or Democrats or anybody who tries to be fair. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Greer?
Okay. Lyndon B. Johnson said, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pockets. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. So since the first indentured servant had the audacity to want to be freed and was made permanently a slave, there's always been agendas against us in this country. And there's agendas against us till this very day. And yes, there's definitely psychological damage. I can only imagine being a slave and being on a buck breaking farm and watching Black men being staked down and raped by white men. In order to put him as an example, if we could do this to the strongest of you, imagine what we could do to the weakest of you. So that was done, a psychological trauma. Those people passed that on. And like I said, agendas continue to this day. They were interviewing Kamala Harris, and someone asked her about reparations. She said, well, we can't do anything for one group of people. And
Disagree.
but that's what she said. That's what she said. But I noticed Asians have a hate bill that only includes them. It doesn't include anybody else. They gave us an anti-lynching bill that requires us to die. If you look at when the Civil Rights Bill was handed out, it didn't focus on us, it focused on others. In order for it to get passed, others had to be included. But I'm looking at an Asian hate bill that don't include anybody but Asians. This country has set forth agendas to control us, to keep us where we are. It's not just the mental issues that African Americans have carried through slavery. There are also physical, legislative, tangible effects of agendas against us. You freed us, then you give us vagrancy laws. You freed us, then we have convict leasing. You freed us, now we have the prison pipeline going from the schools to the prison. So we've been living in a war zone behind enemy lines in a war that has never ended against us. That's how we living today. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Thank you very much. Very well said. Glenn? Hello?
Okay. The slave mentality of slavery had killed the sense of responsibility in us. We felt no responsibility for self or for each other. We look at the slave master for everything that self needed. The teachings of the Nation of Islam has killed that cancerous disease in us that does not recognize any responsibility to ourselves and our own kind. We, the Muslims, know that we have a responsibility to care for each other, and we love to obey each other. The white man has destroyed our thinking to such an extent that our minds weren't developed enough to be taught what to do. So habits had to be built. A good habit for the benefit and progress of self has undone white man's habits that were taught to us for our death as a people. Nation building habits have destroyed slave making habits. The intellect of the members of the Nation of Islam is elevated to such a plane that we become dissatisfied with ourselves in ignorance. We take on a love for real knowledge of any kind. All knowledge that is good knowledge is promoted in the Nation of Islam. Our minds grow stronger, our minds grow higher and higher until we are able to overcome all slavery setbacks of slave mentality.
All right, Glenn, that's 2 minutes. Thank you. The list is open, ladies and gentlemen.
Put me back on the list.
Bill has his hand up.
Bill?
Yeah. A couple of things. Just what I started to say earlier, and I realized I extended my time. You may know this story. Betty White had a TV show, and she had an African-American dancer on the show. And a lot of the Southern whites objected to his presence on her show. And she just said, they're going to have to live with it. That's it. But I'm disappointed that Kamala Harris said what she did, because there's legal justification for reparations, many legal justifications for reparations. And one is as we know, we've talked about here, the federal government made it illegal for Black people, Black GIs, to participate in suburban real estate that lifted a lot of low-income whites to middle class by creating intergenerational wealth through the home ownership. But the federal government made it illegal to sell, for a developer to sell a home to a Black person. And if a white person bought the home, they had to sign as part of the mortgage they would not sell the home or rent the home to a Black person. So that's total legal justification for reparations for the millions of people who are infected by that. And we could go down the list. The things that Glenn is describing is certainly legal grounds for reparation too. Cruel and unusual punishment, which is against our Constitution. Anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you,
Thank you
Bill.
again for Marion for the thought-provoking article.
You're very welcome. Thanks, so appreciate it. It was a perfect 2-minute conversation.
Gigi is gotta have.
All right, I'm writing your name after Glenn's name. Greer. Glenn, your time starts now.
Okay, brothers and sisters, if your destruction as a real man and a real woman begin with the destruction of your willpower as a human being, your restoration should begin with the restoration of your willpower as a human being. The first job is to bring about a development of willpower in you. After your willpower is developed, you can be disciplined and given responsibility. If you do not have willpower, there is nothing you can do but be a slave for other people. Willpower is what rules in you. The Nation of Islam restores your willpower, discipline, guides, and direct you, teach you the responsibility to self, and develop a love in you for self-rule and self-leadership. We bring your mind out of the bondage of slavery into freedom, out of the baby thoughts into grown-up thoughts, and out of the ignorance of darkness into divine light. We have unfailing knowledge of divine mind to raise you up into manhood and womanhood, because we go back to the first problem, and that was created for the destruction of your natural mind. After that problem is solved, we bring you up to the present time and solve all of your problems along the way. Put me back on the list.
Marion, you might want to consider closing the list for the roundup. It's 11:08.
It is 11:08. I was thinking it and you said it, Phyllis. It's 11:09. The time just changed. So we'll let this, Greer, you will be the last person for the regular 2-minute discussion.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you understood.
No,
My bad.
okay. There's a lot of complex things that come into our existence in America, from the debauchery and how we were treated, to the laws and legislation that govern us, and the lack of them protecting us. As American citizens, the laws don't have the same fight and bite to protect us as others. We are still fighting for basic rights of citizenship. And again, it was a slap in the face when Kamala Harris said that, yet we have an Asian hate bill. And knowing the history of our treatment in America, the audacity to think that we don't need that same bill. An anti-lynching bill is not a hate bill. We, as African Americans, in order to be truly protected, we need a hate bill. And that's a big problem. When you legislate and have an agenda against a certain set of people that's been going on from, as the older people say, from time immemorial, and we're still where we are here today talking about this same stuff over and over again, then that's screaming volumes of what still needs to be done. That's it.
Thank you, Greg. Clarifying question from Lynn.
Greer,
Mhm.
could you define what you mean by a hate bill and what it should include?
Our hate bill should reflect what's in the Asian hate bill and actually pertain to only us. We've been systematically, from the inception of this country, used and abused to grow this country. It should have everything that the Asian hate bill, you check it out, because like it's really long. But this anti-lynching bill requires us to die. Then you do something. Is there justice for the dead? No, there isn't. There's only death. That's it. I hope I was I clear enough for you, Lynn? Oh, it's something specific.
I have to look it up. I don't really know the details of the Asian hate bill, I'm sorry to say. Does it criminalize hateful behavior, or does it have compensation and for bad acts?
Greer? Greer, do you have an answer to the question? Because I was thinking maybe that was something we could all look at.
I can hear her talking to you. You can hear her talking?
No, she's mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they need to have definite criminal charges, definitely compensation, and it has to be doled out fairly. Because you know how you can null a bill? If you don't want to see hate, you're not going to see hate. This bill needs to reflect African Americans only. Everything that's ever been legislated for us to move us forward has always included others. It's never been just for us, but yet this Asian hate bill is just for Asians. They mention nobody else in it, just Asians. But the anti-lynching bill, we have to be dead in order to get justice. There's no justice for the dead. There's only death. That's it. Thank you. Hold on, Lynn, did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Greer. The only two people that I've written down, and correct me if I'm wrong, that haven't spoken during our time of discussion is Phyllis and Stanton. So at this time, it is 11:14. I'd like to give Phyllis and Stanton an opportunity to give their point of view. So following the old-fashioned rules of ladies first, Stanton, if you don't mind. Phyllis, would you share your thoughts with us, please?
Who are you calling a lady?
Woman?
No, I'm just kidding. Well, yeah, that it was a lot to take in that article, but I think it was good information. And sometimes you need a long article to really get to the core of things. It was hard to follow everything Glenn was reading out loud to us, but I would agree that the Christian religion has really done a number on the Black people in this country, which I don't think it necessarily does that in other countries, obviously, because there wasn't slavery that the Bible was used to justify, for one thing. And the idea that you can just suffer, in this life and get your reward in the next. And that's how it's supposed to be, but doesn't seem like white people think that's how it's supposed to be for them. Some white people. I actually saw a headline I'm going to go back to that Pew Research has talked about how Christianity is not going to be the majority religion in this country eventually, because a lot of people are leaving it because of the behavior of so-called Christians, such as Greg Abbott and DeSantis, just shipping people across the country against laws, which I hope they get charged with and go to jail, because that hurts me so much. I do think it's in general, I also want to say, I don't just pick on Christianity. I think all organized religion has a way of keeping people in their place, I will say, to control them. It's not just Christianity that does that. I will say I would rather hear somebody express their opinions than read out loud every time they come on the list in a shouty voice. It was really hard to follow, and and keep track of. But thanks for the article, Marion. You did a good job facilitating, and that's all. I don't know if that was 2 minutes.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Stanton, we would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I was really just this morning interested in hearing what other people had to say. That's why I didn't really interject. But I will say that, again, as the child of people who survived the Holocaust, I certainly understand intergenerational trauma. I know that I personally experience it. I think people who are the next generation after me experience it. The paranoia, the distrust, the fear, it is lingering, it continues. Just anecdotally, my mother said to me a year or so ago when she saw some neighbors who had Hanukkah decorations outside their house, well, why would they do that? Why would they want people to know they're Jewish? Aren't they afraid? It's like, hey, it's 2021. No, they're not afraid. Oh, well, I don't know, they're stupid. I said, I understand where you're coming from, but it's sad that you have to think that way. But I personally experience a little of that myself sometimes, thinking I don't necessarily want everybody to know who I am and what my background is for multiple reasons. On the other note, Glenn, I agree with everything that you were saying. I think that there are elements of the Nation of Islam that talk about self-sufficiency and talk about respect for oneself that if, you know, again, sounds like a stupid thing to say, but if I were African-American, I might become a member of the Nation of Islam. There's some other factors that would probably keep me from that, but I won't go into those. And the last thing I would say is, if you want to talk about racism, let's talk about what's happened in Jackson, Mississippi, and the treatment of people in a city by their government that is so atrocious and so heinous that it's hard to believe we're living in a first world country. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Marion, for facilitating and for doing this, even though you had your trauma. So I appreciate that. And again, this is a topic that will never go away. And oh yes, on the issue of reparations, I 100% support reparations for descendants of African-American slaves. So just on that note, that was something else I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so important. Thank you, Stanton. At this time, we still have a few more minutes left in our time. So everyone that has spoken, I'm going to start according to who's the first person on my screen for a 1 minute commentary. We would appreciate your final thoughts. So starting with Lynn, if you would give us a 1 minute commentary, we certainly would appreciate it.
On the topic of reparations, something else to think about is that the German government did pay and continues to pay reparations for survivors of the Holocaust. No questions asked.
I just want to interject, not very much. My mother's a recipient. It ain't a lot of money.
Okay, I didn't know the amount. I just have a relative who received care that was paid for by the German government in her old age. But I do too support reparations. We need to do that. Everybody else seems to have reparations, but not Black people. And I wanted to mention that tomorrow night on PBS, there's the Ken Burns show on the Holocaust and Americans, how we closed our doors to these immigrants. I think even Anne Frank's father had had plans to come to the United States and they were turned down, and you know what happened to their family. It's something that we should look at when we consider unkindness to immigrants and to other people.
Thank you, Lynn. Cindy?
An interesting thing just happened. On my computer, this little sort of flag came across saying that someone just left a baby on Kamala Harris's porch. And I'm sure it is an African-American baby, and she's supposed to, I mean, it's saying, you spoke about this, so here you go. Be interesting to hear more about it later. The topic, the whole discussion, this article today, I think we all know there's a lot that has not been made right, and I don't know if it can ever be made right. Pretty horrible history we have. But then if you go further back, look at the treatment of the Native Americans, and how can we even hold our heads up at the behavior of our country? It's frightening. But I'm not sure that, well, enough said. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Marva?
Good article. It stated, it provoked a lot of discussion. Federal government, it's always was responsible for the mistreatment of certain segments of population. Example, federal programs, food stamps, and family planning was out about 5 years for minorities knew about it. I look at it as aiding white people to get further advancement by being able to plan their families, keeping family sizes down and progressing financially. Food stamps was to help poor white people in nutritional status and being able to eat healthy and don't spend a lot of their monies. Federal programs is for each of the youth as citizens. Federal programs should be accessible to all Americans, and that being able to penalize certain segments with withholding of benefits. Good article, Marion. Wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Cheryl, did I know you spoke, but the thing has shifted on my screen again. So we're gonna go with that. Cheryl?
Thank you. Thank you everyone for all your comments. I learned some things today and I'm grateful for that article to be able to go back and read it some more. I think probably that's what I have to say. Have a really good week. Bye.
Thank you, Cheryl. Bill?
People have talked about the negative role that Christianity has played for people of color, but it's the misuse of Christianity. The teachings of Jesus, if you actually follow them, you would support everyone. And the Romans were the first to misuse Christianity, and it's been misused ever since. The Romans used it, implemented. They keep their their empire more subservient. And to get allegiance, they made Rome the capital of Christianity. But the things that reached through to people, and I know some of the people in this group are Christians, and my moral compass came from the Christian church. But I also, the teachings of Jesus shows me that what a lot of people say about Christianity is not at all what Jesus taught. So anyway, I'm going to talk about 3 things in the announcements, opportunities for people. Thank you. Thanks for the article, Marion.
You're very welcome. Glenn, final thoughts?
Well,
1
I
minute.
would spend my time talking about you, how you handle me on this, but I'm going to talk about something else on my final thoughts. I appreciate what Stanton said, and I'd like to clear up something. You know, that article was from 1975, and we were we were changing from the Nation of Islam. Our leader had taken us away from. We were called at that time the Nation of Islam, but we really were pulling away from that. And I'm not in the Nation of Islam, but I just was reading the article from where we begin to get taught to see the scheme that was put upon us, and our people still don't have their willpower yet. They can have education, but they still don't have their willpower yet. They look to the white man for to tell them how to bank, how to have their education. They're not doing anything for themselves. They turn to the white man for help. Right now they want to march on Washington to get some reparations. Always looking to the white man. You can make your own reparation if you had the willpower, but you're still a slave in that religion. You got a white man on your porch, you got a white man in your house, a statue of a white man who you believe in as God. So as long as you are under that kind of mental slavery, I don't care what people say about what true Christianity is. I'm dealing with the actuality of what Christianity is doing and has done to effect keeping us as slaves. I hope that wasn't too loud.
Thank you, Glenn. Phyllis, I know you hit the 2 minutes. Would you like another minute to voice some more thoughts?
No, that was my wrap up. I had the 2 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else? I'm still.
Greer, maybe?
Greer.
Okay, the federal government created welfare. Welfare was used to take Black men out of Black homes. But by doing so, you've altered the Black family. But yet when white farmers had issues and they received subsidy, it wasn't required for white men to be removed from their home. And at the same time, with welfare being given to Black families, they created the situation in which the Black man had to struggle to make ends meet because of racism. Again, the federal government has had agendas against us coming up, us being families, us coming together. But it's going to take us to save us, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. So at this time, I would like to express my appreciation to all of you for your patience
Mhm.
uh, and appreciation for voicing your opinions or your beliefs. Uh, as a final thought, some of my comments will be negative, some of them will be positive, but from a moral standpoint, I believe that the United States is built on hypocrisy and evil. And I know a lot of people say, well, if you don't like it, leave. Well, no, I'm not going to leave. This is where I was born. There are people here that I love. I'm not going to leave my children or my grandchildren, my cousins, my siblings. I'm not going to leave those people behind because I believe that there is hypocrisy and evil in this country. As a member of society, I'm going to do what I can, and I'm just going to try to encourage other people to live as decent human beings would live. We are supposed to treat each other with respect. We say that in our Erace slogan, love and respect. Well, you don't have to grovel at anyone's feet to show them that you respect them, but just because we are at the highest level of the living being chain, we are able to speak and think like animals can't, dogs and cats or alligators or kangaroos cannot. And I don't think it's that difficult to treat other human beings with dignity, respect, honor, love, whatever it takes to make us really, truly human beings. I think it's unforgivable that in the year 2022, that you still have people living among us that think some of us are mistakes. I told someone, I'm going to say it to this group, God did not make a mistake. And I imagine a God sitting on his throne, shaking his head. And I just wonder, do people ever consider none of us created ourselves? So why in the name of heaven are you treating some people worse than you treat dirt? And then you elevate other people to the status of a king or a queen. So if we could just get about the business of looking at each other as plain old human beings to be revered, yes, revered, respected, put yourself in that person's shoes. Don't be so blinded by bigotry and hatred that you cannot see beyond this superficial physicality. There's a human being with a soul, with a heart, a stomach, lungs, but more than anything else, a soul, and really created in the image of our creator. I believe that. I don't wish to sound like a holy roller or a religious fanatic, but that's whose image we are to be created in. The story of the Little Mermaid triggered a remembrance that I may have shared with some of you some years ago, maybe more recently than years ago, about how there was an artist depiction many years ago on the cover of the supplemental magazine called Dixie Roto that used to come with the Times-Picayune. And it was a artist rendering of Jesus Christ. He was somewhat beige in color in his complexion, and he had short curly hair. And a white man from Metairie, who identified himself as a white man from Metairie, had a conniption fit. Oh, Jesus didn't have curly hair. Jesus didn't have beige tones. And several people wrote in later to comment that considering the area of the world that he lived in, he most certainly would have had some color in his complexion, and he would have had curly hair, according to the archaeological finds. They found skeletal remains of men that lived in the time of Jesus. And they were able to say that these men had curly hair, they were short in stature, and their complexion had a little color in it. So that was supposed to eradicate that belief that Jesus had the features of a European white man. So we need to get about the business of, at this stage in all of our lives, I think, just looking at people as human beings. You're human, I'm human. You deserve to be respected. You need to be treated with dignity and honor. We are all worthy. Nobody is less than anybody. Nobody is more than anybody. I think about that 96-year-old lady that just passed away in England. And there were people crying and grieving and carrying on in the line as they went to pay her respects. And I remember this young man saying, we need to be beyond this time of kings and queens. He was trying to be respectful. And I think of the lady as being a mother first. And because of that line of succession, she was elevated to that status. But what it all boils down to, she's a human being. And I'm not going to say anything derogatory about the lady, but I believe this is what we should work on, treating each other as we wish to be treated. And I know it sounds kind of Pollyannish, but that's what we all are. One day we all are going to be somewhere cold in a coffin or in an urn. And I believe we're going to have to stand before the one who created us and give an accounting. So I'm going to try. I'm by no means elevating myself to some superior status, but I really am going to continue trying for how many few years I have left on this planet to treat my fellow human beings as I wish to be treated. So I want to thank everybody for their contributions today. I know I read this article at least 3 times, and I know it was a little lengthy, but according to your comments, I think it was worth discussing today. So without further ado, do we have any announcements?